I'd like to welcome you this morning to Destination Community Church. We're grateful that you're with us today. This is our 9:30 service. We have a 9:30 service on Sundays as well as an 11:15 service. If you're a first-time guest, we are very grateful that you're here with us today. However it was that you heard about the church, we just want you to feel like a guest. We want you to feel welcome and just let you know how much we love you today. It's a special day for me, and it's always a special day whenever I'm able to have family come into town, and my dad is actually with us here on the front row. So Beth is not remarried, this guy that's beside her. So she's not trading me in for an older man. But this is my dad, and my dad's here as frequently as he's able to be here. And in the second service, I'm going to have I know I talk about my older brother just a little bit more, but I have a younger brother and a younger sister. And they're going to be here as well as my stepmom, so I'm very excited about that. And I'm also thrilled that we're in part 3 today of our 4-week journey titled Grit, in which we're investigating what real faith actually looks like, opposed to inherited belief or more of a form of generalized belief. In the 3 weeks that we've discussed this, or the prior 2 weeks that we've discussed this, we've talked about the importance of faith in this discussion within our society, both inside of Christianity and also outside of Christianity, because if we were to be honest, all of us have questions. Believers have questions. Non-believers have a lot of questions. You have some people that are more apathetic, that simply don't care. A lot of people that believe that they're practicing faith and they're not practicing faith. So my goal whenever we started this series was really to look at what does it actually mean to have genuine faith, like biblical faith? How far is it that we can dig into one particular passage and look at exactly what this means so that whenever you guys walk away early in the year after 4 weeks, you can say to yourself, all right, I know what I'm going through is exercising genuine faith in my life, or, man, I've been wrong. And what I've actually been doing, I've had kind of more of a generalized belief, but my life doesn't actually show the fruits of what faith is. So that's kind of where we've been. And I feel like if we have this talk early in the year, we can come to some pretty serious conclusions and changes, see some changes that we actually need to make in our lives. So a theme that we've had throughout this series that we're going to continue to look at is this. Authentic faith does not come natural. In other words, it's not something that you're simply born with. And authentic faith is not easy, all right? It's not something whenever we talk about having faith every day, it's not necessarily something that's easy. Authentic faith grows through a part of a 4-part formula. Now, it's been our desire in this 4-week series to discuss what this formula looks like. And not just to talk about what what Paul called a literary heap, or what's called a literary heap, not just what Paul is referencing here simply in words, but also getting deep into the Greek meaning of what these words are so that we can see this as a process. We know that whenever we come to know Jesus, we come to know Jesus through the experience of faith. But what after that? How is it that faith actually grows into something real, something tangible, something that changes our lives, opposed to, well, at some point we said a prayer to accept Jesus, and that's as far as we went, and in our minds we just kind of look back. Well, sure, certainly at such and such Baptist church, or at such and such Methodist church, or at such and such experience with all these other young people, everybody was emotionally fired up, and I said a prayer, I accepted Christ, so I know that I'm okay. Well, maybe you're okay, and maybe you're not okay. And that's what we want to look at really closely as we investigate faith. Now, this four-part formula that we actually talked about, and if you've not been here, I'll kind of walk you through what we've already talked about just a little bit. I talked about suffering as laying the foundation of what faith actually is. And in week 1, what we talked about is that the majority of people who actually come to Christ through faith start from a place of suffering. In some cases, it's just this knowing, okay, I don't have God in my life and bad things are going on. That's how simple it is for some people. For other people, they go through a divorce, they go through a serious breakup, they go through a death in the family, they go through an illness, they go through financial loss, they go through addiction, whatever it might be. They go through some kind of suffering that opens up the reality of what God is. And this is where this faith thing starts to come into perspective. But the important thing is that we all suffer, but the question is, do we suffer well? And if we suffer well, as Paul talks about, what this leads to is perseverance. What perseverance or endurance actually means in the Greek is that we exist under the submission of God through our suffering. So whenever we actually go through these problems, these typical problems that everybody in life has, we are making the decision within our hearts and within our lives that we are going to stick with God through those problems. We're not going to go to all of these other external outlets that we're able to go to whenever we hurt, but we're going to make the decision, God, I am going to stay put. I am going to trust you. I'm going to continue this early stage of faithfulness, what it means to have faith in this growth. I'm going to go through it with you. And faith is going to mean obedience. So what that means when we're going through this period of perseverance is that sometimes we're having to give up things in our lives in order to come closer to God. And again, we're remaining under the submission of God. Now, what we're going to talk about today is how perseverance over time, persevering, another trial, another tribulation, another difficult time, eventually what this is going to do is going to produce character. Character, then, Paul says, is going to produce hope, which is what we're going to talk about next week. And hope over time is going to build what we would see as an authentic faith. So you don't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden have this deep, strong, authentic faith. It's something that we build over time through an important process. What's interesting is that some of you in here are in the suffering stage. So you're in this stage where you know that things are really bad. You go through these things. They're seemingly over, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you went through these things with God. Some of you have suffered with God, and you're getting close to that perseverance part. The perseverance part really hurts. It really hurts because you're having to make a conscious decision in your life. I'm going to submit myself to God's authority, and I'm going to remain under God's authority regardless of how difficult this is or what the outcome is that I can't possibly know at this point in my life. Now, what happens after that is we start to look at individuals and we say, man, there is something different about him, or there is something different about her. I'm around all these religious people, which are often crazy, if we're going to be really honest. I'm around all these religious people all the time, and they say this stuff, but they do something else, and I kind of just don't see anything real or authentic about that. But there's really something different about the way that he lives his life. There's something different about the way that she lives her life. And what we're able to say about them is that they have character. All right, so that's what we're actually going to get into today. But before we do that, we're going to go back to our primary text, which is Romans 5, 1 through 5. I hope you guys have been looking at this at least once a week, if not more often, but that you've been looking at this primary passage that we're going through. We've talked about Romans as being Paul's magnum opus, or his longest letter. Not necessarily his most important letter, but definitely a significant letter, as it gives this roadmap to salvation that's so important. So you guys have that on your outline today. If you want to look it up, you can. If you want to use your phone, you can, but you can find it up here on the screen as well. So this is what Paul says for the third time. Therefore, since we have been justified through faith, so it's this experience of faith that we go through that gives us peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we've gained access to this grace by faith, in which we now stand. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings. That's a real common trend that we're going to see. We're going to talk about it again in a second when we look at a passage in 1 Peter. How whenever we go into our suffering, we're not complaining about our suffering. Because a lot of times I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to get through this obstacle? What am I going to do about this? How are we going to pay these bills? How are we going to take care of this? How am I going to get through this issue with my kids or in my marriage or whatever it might be? But there's actually this common pattern in the New Testament of actually finding joy or satisfaction whenever we see these sufferings or these problems start to come along, because we've grown to such a point of maturity that we can say, I'm going to be better as a result of this. So that's what Paul is actually talking about. Because he says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know, and here it is, here's our formula, that suffering produces perseverance, or as some translations say, endurance. That perseverance is then going to produce character. Character is then going to give us hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So a gigantic dimension of faith is character. But this is not typically what we think about when we think about character. If we just say he has good character or she has good character. Character comes from the Greek word dokime, the word dokime. And what this means is experienced, tested, or to be approved of something. So if you have character, what this is suggesting is that you have a tremendous amount of experience. You have been tested over and over again. In other words, character does not come overnight, and you have been actually approved by God. So that's what we're talking about, and that's why it's this 4-point process. And it's not just all of a sudden you get saved one day, and all of a sudden, man, this guy has tremendous character. This girl has tremendous character. It is something that is built through a process. So consider the process of purifying gold. Gold will be placed in a fire to burn away or remove all impurities. And what you're actually left with is complete solid gold, what a lot of you have around your necks right now. It's then approved by the goldsmith. And you see, God does the exact same thing in our lives. 1 Peter 1, verses 6 and 7 says this. This is the perfect scripture to illustrate what we're talking about. So be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must what? Endure what we're talking about. You must persevere many trials for a little while. So going back to what we started talking with, again, James said this in week 1, count it joy when you go into suffering or fall into temptation. But we see this again. Peter says, so be truly glad when you go into these moments. Because some of you have been through these moments so many times that you know the beauty of the outcome. Of course this is a bad situation. Of course this is a time where it's very easy to give up. But the point is this. There is a reason for this trial. There is a reason for this suffering. And if you endure, if you persevere, in the long run, you are going to come out closer to me, being like me, and what you were supposed to be, the intentionality with which you were born. So what this does is it changes our perspective as we enter into the most difficult moments in our lives, okay? Things are going hard in the marriage. Financially, things are hard. You're having difficulty with your teenage kids. Whatever it might be, you should start asking the question, God, what are you up to? God, what is it that you're actually wanting to put me through? What is the outcome of this? How is it that you actually bring me closer to you in this process? These trials will show you that your faith is genuine. I showed you guys in week 1 a passage from James 1, and we looked at Eugene Peterson's The Message, and I believe the way that he said it was, your faith or what you go through, these sufferings will reveal your true colors as far as your faith is concerned. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Though, and keep this in mind, your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, again, endurance or perseverance are built over time, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day in which Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. So in other words, this is what this means. In the beginning stages of this period, those of you that are in here suffering right now, but you've never suffered well. In other words, you go through an experience, you understand how difficult that experience is, but then you never do anything about it as far as growing in your relationship with God. You find that situation comes again, you rush off to whatever it may be, the bad relationship, the drink, you stop coming to church, whatever direction it might be, and you never grow through that. But here's the goal, and here's what this actually means. In stage 1, when we're talking about suffering, and then in stage 3, whenever we're talking about character, you should look like a completely different person. All right, you should look like a completely different person. Now, this may be a process as far as growth that people can tell a difference in you in 6 months. This may be something that people recognize over 10 years in your spiritual life. But the point is, as you grow through this experience that we call faith, you are transforming and becoming a different person as things go through. We become experienced. That's the key word, character. Experienced as we grow in our faith toward Christ. Okay, so let's suppose that 10 years ago, all right, 10 years ago, you asked me to come over and babysit your two daughters. All right, here they are right here. You asked me to come over and what movie is this? Okay, great. All right. So you asked me to come over and babysit your two daughters. I can promise you that's a mistake. All right, that's a mistake because 10 years ago, I know absolutely nothing, not only about kids, but I know nothing about little girls. All right, I have no clue. Now you ask me today, I'm the dad of two girls, no boys. So I know all about the drama, the makeup, the boys, the baking, the gymnastics, the cheerleading, the diaper changing, all of it. All right, your daughters would be in very good hands because I completely understand all of that stuff. And why is that? Because at this stage of my life, in the place that I'm in right now, I have experience. But 10 years ago, I didn't have this experience. We build experience in our faith over time, and this develops character. So maintaining that endurance or that perseverance as we go through the most difficult times will establish character in your life. So a few things to recognize this morning. The first is this. Faith involves constant movement. It involves constant movement. Now, this may seem to be a contradiction from what we talked about last week. Because what we talked about last week was literally, when we talk about endurance and when we talk about perseverance, we talk about you literally remaining under the submission of God at all times. So you are actually standing still. You are standing still through every moment of your life, but your faith life is growing and changing and evolving and bringing you into being something greater, but you're actually not moving. But faith is not a stagnant thing. Faith is constantly moving. Remember last week when we talked about the circumstances that you go through, what perseverance means, what endurance means, is that you are going to stand in one spot. You are going to remain, even though it feels like your life is falling apart. It feels like there is all this chaos. You don't have the answers. You don't know what to do. You don't know why all of a sudden this depression or this anxiety or these problems that you're going through, whatever it might be, you have no idea why these things are occurring in your life. Well, what we see this is suffering. A trial, a test, and we are to remain put throughout this entire thing. But what's interesting and what we can't see is that faith is constantly moving if we are remaining still. It's actually a really cool, really interesting thing. So the problem that we see is when your faith enters a place of stagnation or complacency, and you make the decision that that faith is not going to grow. And whenever this happens, you're entering the beginning stages of spiritual life support. And what happens as a result of that, if you continue on this trend, is eventually you're facing inevitably the reality of spiritual death. Because James tells us faith without works is dead. So there are people that are in here right now, in this room, and your faith is on spiritual life support. You're just barely making it by. And maybe there was a time when you held on tight to Christ, you held on tight to the cross. It was absolutely everything to you. Anything that you went through, you made sure that you were going through it with Jesus. You were going through it with your relationship with God, and that's just not the case now. And there are some of you that are just, your faith right now, it is just dead. It is non-existent. But I would say, and I hope that I'm wrong about this, but that the majority of people that are in here have never even taken the first breath as far as faith is concerned. And you've said, well, I've said a prayer to accept Jesus, and I try to go to church, and I try to be good, or I try to live by good morals, and those are things that are really important to me. But I think the question is, whenever you go through the difficult moments of life, into your suffering, do you suffer well? How do you enter into those moments? Do you have that perseverance and that endurance that is eventually going to build this amazing character? You see, faith is constantly taking us into deeper levels of trust in Christ, and it's constant movement. It's constant movement. And through this movement, you are developing the kind of character that will change the world, an authentic personhood, what you were actually designed and created to be. You see, I wasn't designed and created to simply be a husband or to simply be a sociology professor or to simply be a dad or to simply be a resident of Kentucky or whatever it might be. I have a deeper purpose in my life, and every single individual in this room has a deeper purpose in their life. Your job does not define you. The alcohol that you drink, the drugs that you smoke, whatever it is, it does not define you. The music that you listen to, the car that you drive, these things do not define you. You may have the impression that they define you, but what must define you is who you are in Jesus. And the only way that you will ever know that is if you authentically move through this process, from suffering to perseverance to character. That's the only way that you'll know. And I truly worry about people that say that they're exercising faith and nothing ever changes at all in their lives. A person that got saved, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, but the sins that they struggle with, pornography, gossip, cheating, lying, whatever it may be, taking advantage of others, treating their neighbor poorly, whatever it might be, nothing's ever changed. It's like they're in this stagnant, complacent place in which nothing ever changes. And I would question if that is actually real faith. All right, faith equals movement toward Christ into a deeper involvement, a deeper life, a deeper fellowship with Him. Stagnation means spiritual decay and deadness, or staying still through this process. But here's the real question that we need to consider as far as the definition or the meaning of character. Through my faithfulness in times of suffering, all right, through my faithfulness in times of suffering, am I winning over the approval of God? All right, am I winning over the approval of God? Now, we know, if you know anything about being a Christian, that we can't, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Our righteousness is filthy rags. We can never do enough to get that kind of approval from God. But the question is this: are we staying faithful through the suffering that we go through, and are we suffering well? Are we suffering with Christ as we go through this? You guys know by this point that I'm a big fan of the show 24. All right, I watch that show. In fact, that's what I'm not doing on Lent, is watching 24. All right, but I'm a big fan of the show. And every season, if you've watched that show or any show like this, every season, every 4 or 5 episodes, someone gets captured and tortured. All right, maybe it's Jack Bauer, like the good guy, or maybe it's like a terrorist or whoever it may be. And as soon as, they tie them up, they're like, you're going to tell me the information that I want. And, of course, they're really heroic, and they're like, I will die for my cause. You're not. And I'm thinking, if you give me a cookie, I'll give you all the information you want. That's what I'm thinking at home. But, so they're going through all this suffering, and they know in this situation, it's always the same. It's so predictable. But they know they must maintain character even in their deepest affliction, all right, for approval. And what we consider this within Christianity is tried integrity. Tried integrity. And what this actually means is that our spiritual position toward God and our social position for others. Keep in mind the 2 great commandments, love for God and love for neighbor. All right, we can, and we're not going to skip over the rest of the Bible because the Bible is very important, but if you understand those 2 things and you can live into those 2 things, the rest of the Bible is going to become easier if you can really get this down. So our spiritual position toward God and our social position toward others, as far as how we treat other people, remains the same. We remain on that rock. We remain in the same place through the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we have people in this room right now that are going through the good in their life. Everything is wonderful. That's temporary. You know that if you've lived enough years. Some of you are going through the bad right now, some really tough stuff. And some of you in here right now are going through the ugly. And life is really, really hard. But the point is that you remain with God and you stay with God and you make the decision as a faithful person that I am going to wait this out. I am not going to try my way. I am going to exist under this submission. And as a result of that, as a result of my integrity being tried under fire, I'm going to remain faithful to God. Now, the next thing that I want you to recognize, and this is why so many people don't make it, is that character refinement is painful. Character refinement is unbelievably painful. One thing that I recognize is that God is constantly trying to raise your threshold of pain. You go through something, it hurts. You feel like you could never forgive that person again. You feel like, God, I can't believe that I saw myself yesterday doing so well, and today I'm in this place today. How is it that circumstances can change so much in a 24-hour period? Or how is it that I was this person a year ago, and today I seem to be struggling with these problems that I'm having? God is constantly, through everything that we're going through, raising our threshold of pain. So have you ever prayed that prayer that I've prayed before, and I know some of you in here have? God, bring me closer to you or make me more faithful. So many of you have prayed that before. You've been at this altar here, or you've been at the altar at another church, or you've been at home and you've just felt this complacency or this stagnation in your life because you know that your faith is not moving, and you know that there are so many things that you could be doing for God, and you've said, God, whatever it takes, you've prayed like a Job prayer, like take my livestock, burn my house down, whatever it means, just do whatever it takes to bring me closer to you. And then all of a sudden, after a 24-hour period, or maybe the following week, or whenever this stuff starts to take effect, you regret that prayer. You're saying to yourself, God, why did I ever ask you to bring me? She doesn't want to date me anymore. Or he doesn't want to be with me anymore. Or all of a sudden, I had this activity, this thing that I love, this thing that I did outside of church, that, and now you're telling me that I should be in church more, that I should give more. Why is it that I have to go through this? Keep in mind that this word for character, what it literally means is purifying a fine metal through fire for approval by the goldsmith or the blacksmith or whoever it may be in this case. So there are two parts of suffering that we have to recognize. The actual suffering that everyone goes through. There is not one person, not one adult in here that's not went through suffering, but then more importantly, the purifying process that we go through during suffering that actually builds what is real faith. You see, it matters so little what comes out of your mouth if it's not in your heart. It matters so little what comes out of your mouth if you are not walking that walk every single day of your life. Because people outside the church, what they're doing to us is they're watching us often because they're just looking for the next act of hypocrisy that will be one more excuse that will keep them from faith. But what happens in situations whenever they look at individuals that are in this room right now and they're able to say, man, she has real character. He has real character. For all the bad things I can say about so many people that attend church, she's not one of them. She seems to really be impersonating, emulating something that really seems worthwhile. And you want to know something? That has nothing to do with her. It has nothing to do with him. It has to do with their desire to exercise real faith in the Son of God. And in the Son of God is living through them. And that is what people are seeing as a result of suffering. So there are people in this room right now that have suffered. But if you are not allowing God to direct you through this suffering, the suffering experience is very different. So faith is movement. Faith is action. Faith is submission. And without obedience, faith is just another 5-letter word. It's just another 5-letter word that we tag to so many other different words within spirituality that we use. All right, you guys with me? Amen. Good, okay. All right, so the last point is this. Faith isn't known until it's tested. Faith is not known until it's tested, and this is where character development really starts to begin. I'm going to name someone that's probably not very popular in this room, especially with Matt, but Tom Brady. All right, so Tom Brady has been to 8 Super Bowls. It's a funny time for the music to come in when we start discussing Tom Brady. Keep going with it, Jordan. All right. So Tom Brady has been to 8 Super Bowls, and before Super Bowl 52, this recent Super Bowl, he said he didn't feel nervous because he had been there so many times. Maybe he should have felt nervous considering the outcome. All right, but he said that he didn't feel nervous because he had been there so many times. 8 Super Bowls, that's pretty remarkable. All right, now imagine if you go into this Super Bowl experience as a rookie. Starting as a rookie, and you've been in so many football games your entire life, and you maybe been in a lot of, at this point, you've been in some NFL games in your life and even some playoff games, but this is the first time that you've ever been in a Super Bowl. The difference between the two, Tom Brady and this rookie, is one thing: level of experience. It's a level of experience. That is the only difference. And again, the Greek word for character, dokime, means that you have experience or you're currently going through experience that builds character. You've been through the fire and you come out with God every single time. And again, I mentioned social media a lot. This is not about these platitudes that we put on social media. God carried me through this, God did that. When you're actually not standing still in that place that God requires us to stand still. So this experience, we're not talking about church experience. All right, we're not talking about experience leading youth or leading kids. We're not talking about how much of the Bible that you know. We're talking about genuine faith experience. Genuine faith experience. That is the only thing that matters. Now, do you know that if character is built by genuine faithfulness through suffering, if character is built through genuine faithfulness through suffering, there could be a former addict that's been a Christian for 6 months with more character than someone that's been in church their entire life. If they've walked through that experience and they've said, with this addiction or someone else, with my finances, with my marriage, with whatever it is that I'm struggling with, I am turning everything over to you. They already have more character than someone who's sat in church their entire lives and done nothing. So there's one more verse that I want to share with you this morning. And this verse, this really got me through this week. Last week was a bad week. Just a number of things going on. Psalms 62:6 says this: He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. So you may want to take note of this verse if you go through it some time this week when you're struggling, because this is what I did. And I actually love the translation, the Message, but this is how Eugene Peterson says this. I love this. He's solid rock under my feet at all times. He's solid rock under my feet, breathing room for my soul, an impregnable castle. I'm set for life. I have absolutely nothing to worry about. So again, last week, it doesn't matter what, but I'm just going through some stuff. And listen, it's nothing compared to what a lot of people in this world went through last week, but just some stuff that just happened that brought about more stress than a typical week. And one thing that really happened, or really helped me, was my men's small group reaching out and praying for me, stuff that I didn't even expect. And Jordan, I don't know where he is, but I'll mention this. Whenever you sent that message, you said something like, I don't know what's going on in your life, but I'm praying for you and Beth and Cora and Callie. That was like the worst moment of this week. And it's one of the reasons I think that our small groups are so important and that our small groups mean so much. But you know what I was thinking as I went through everything this week? In my darkest moments and in other times in my life, I just keep thinking, He's breathing room for my soul. He's breathing room for my soul. I really, really never have anything to worry about because we go through all of these different circumstances. I don't care if you're upper class, middle class, lower class. You have absolutely nothing. He is breathing room for our soul. And whenever that reality really takes hold, whenever we really are able to grab a hold of that and make it something real in our lives, everything changes. Everything changes. And people start to recognize character through our walk and through our lives. They don't see us as these preachy religious people. They see us as authentic Jesus followers whenever we let everything go and fall under that submission. Now, there are some of you in here this week and you feel challenged by this because you want character. You see the importance of that. You don't feel that faith should be some shallow, superficial thing, just this belief that we talk about, but that it needs to be something that are exercised in our lives. And then there are others of you in here that have possibly never taken that first step as far as faith is concerned. And being a church for the unchurched, we think it's important sometimes to make sure that you guys understand what the process looks like and what the steps look like if you've never accepted Jesus before. And you could be in here right now suffering, broken, struggling. You've put on the faith face. You've compartmentalized God with everything else in your life, but you've never actually had that authentic relationship. There are several things that you have to recognize and that you need to understand. The first is this, and it's simple. You have to acknowledge that you can't do it on your own. You have to acknowledge that you simply cannot do it, that you need a Savior, that you need something that is greater than you. You just cannot do it. You can't clean yourself up enough. That's what we hear from so many people. Whenever I straighten my life out, whenever I've stopped using drugs, whenever my marriage is in a better place, whenever I've got a job, whenever people will say, whenever I'm not cussing as much or whatever. They have all these, whenever I stop smoking, whatever. Then I'm going to go to church because I feel at that point you can never clean yourself up enough. So you have to acknowledge that you can't do it on your own. And the truth is, some of you have never acknowledged that you can't do it on your own. It's Jesus plus me. Or it's Jesus plus what I want. Or if Jesus is lucky, I'm going to fit him in where he fits in my life. That's not the way it works. It's complete submission. It's turning everything over. So acknowledge that you can't do it on your own. You have to accept that you need forgiveness for your sin, that you are a sinner. It's not because you're bad or because you're good. It's because you inherently, as a human being, are a sinner. And you need forgiveness for that sin. Well, that happened fast. All right, you need to trust that Jesus paid the price for your sin. So this is the point in which you're saying, you know what? I'm letting go of Matt Smith, and I am completely grabbing a hold of Jesus. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that means. I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. I don't even know what it's going to feel like whenever I'll leave this building right now. But I am making the decision to let go of myself once and for all. And what you do with that is you choose, because again, this is not a one-time thing. You choose to trust Jesus and allow him to lead the direction of your life. It's a way of you saying, I've tried my way for 16 years. I've tried my way for 47 years. I've tried my way for a long period of time. I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic, or I've been in church for a long time. I've played church, going to church because somebody wants me to, because I feel like it's going to make my relationship with that person stronger, or whatever it might be. But the bottom line is that you can never exercise faith until you begin a relationship with Jesus. So with all heads bowed this morning and all eyes closed, there is no doubt in a room this size that they're in